Hi, everyone. I'm investigative reporter Claudia Vargas, and I am here to chat about a new series that we're launching this Friday at 7 p.m. It's called Somebody Knows Something, and the first installment is on the disappearance of Dulce. Dulce was 5 years old in 2019 when she went missing, and I'll tell you guys a little bit more about the case in a bit. I also have a colleague of mine who was on the scene in 2019 to talk a little bit about what happened just hours after she went missing. But first, let's show you a preview of the documentary that's to come.
911, where's your emergency?
I can't find my daughter.
She was playing in the slides with her brother. We believe that she was taken from the park.
As time goes on, the investigation becomes more difficult.
I can't imagine what this mother's going through.
This investigation is very close.
If you're asking me what I believe the child is alive somewhere.
Somebody knows something.
All right, so that was the preview, and joining me is Matt DeLucia, one of our NBC 10 reporters, and one of our reporters who was on the scene the day after Dulce went missing, and once there was this big police presence at the park. Now, for people who aren't familiar with the case, I'm just going to summarize it a little bit and then get into, Matt, what you remember from back then. So Dulce, as I had mentioned before, 5 years old, she goes to the park with her little brother, mom's in the car. She can see them from a distance a little bit. She's working on a lottery scratch off. Kids are playing. Next thing she knows, she looks up and can't see her kids, goes to check on them, and she only finds Manuel, the little brother, crying, and Dulce is nowhere to be found. Now, Manuel at the time was 3 years old. He was nonverbal, so he couldn't really say what happened. And eventually, mom calls police. A huge police search ensues. You had local, state, federal authorities searching for this little girl. And to this day, she has yet to be found. So, Matt, you were there just hours really after she went missing. What do you remember from that day?
I just remember a huge search effort from both the and also the people in the community. Just that came out to try to find this little girl, because this is something that really does not happen often in our area, thankfully, but particularly in that community, that this 5-year-old girl just went missing, just vanished without a trace from a playground. And so I know that definitely struck a chord with a lot of people in that area. It's right next to a high school where that playground is. There's also, just a large wooded area around there. There was a pond. And I just remember just a huge search effort with people going just everywhere around that park, because she literally could have been anywhere at that point. But unfortunately, she was not found that day or any day thereafter.
Right, because for people who aren't familiar with Bridgeton City Park, it's 1,100 acres. And at least from our interviews with police, they thought initially that she was just lost somewhere in the woods. And mom even said, I thought she was just playing hide and seek. So do you recall seeing like a big effort just kind of with police going through the woods, or what was the search really like on the ground?
Yeah, there were just people walking through the woods, combing through just trees, through bushes, through plants, walking around buildings, around that playground. Really just trying to retrace every possible step that this child could have taken that day. But as I mentioned, with the vast expanse of that park and the fact that there, is a body of water nearby. You had, police officers looking around that pond as well. I remember I was up in Skyforce 10 later that day, so that I was able to get a pretty good vantage point from the air of what that search looked like. And it was a mix of, a methodical search effort combined with, we don't know where she could have gone. Because no one saw her in a vehicle. No one saw her running away. No one saw anyone take her or anything like that. So there were just so many questions, so many unknowns. She literally could have been, behind a tree, or she could be, 100 miles away at that point. And that was, sort of the problem with that search early on was just, we didn't know, and they didn't know. The mom didn't know. So it was just a lot of questions that were left to be answered in those early hours.
Yeah, and one of the problems was that there weren't any cameras in the park, which I'll get into in a second. But I just want to tell folks, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll try to answer them as best we can. Matt, as I said, was there on the ground. Um, I've been working on this for a few months, so we've done a lot of interviews with law enforcement officials, obviously Dulce's family. So happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. But Matt, just going back to the fact that they didn't really know what was going on. You were there 24 hours, and my understanding is at that point, they still didn't know whether she had been abducted or if she was still lost.
Mhm.
No cameras in the park to really confirm where she went. I know there were some eyewitnesses at the basketball court who had described a man, or actually, initially, I think it was two men. Then it was one man that they reduced it to because police tell us that they interviewed one of the men that was described. Then you had this red van, and I don't know if you were there still a few days later when they were. When they announced the red van, but that was like a big deal, right? And then you had like random residents just looking for any kind of red vehicle. Do you remember that? Like, tell us a little bit about that part of the search.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, when you have so few clues to go off of, people were just grasping at any possible lead. And so you had that red van, that was the big lead. And I don't remember if there was a picture of the van, or if it was just, it was talked about this van. But yeah, people were looking all over for a red van. And then there was the video of Dulce in the convenience store. That last known video of her. And so, people were just, trying to figure out, like, okay, retracing, where that convenience store was to the park, was she around that area? And so it really was just a lot of people in the community just trying to say, I'm going to do whatever I can to try to help and try to find this girl and bring her back home. But yeah, I mean, it was just one of those things where, something popped up, a lead as small or as big as that, as a vehicle. And, people were just jumping on that opportunity and hoping that that was going to be the answer and the key to finding her.
Yeah, and you talk about the community coming out to help. I remember one of your stories, you had an ice cream truck was brought in hopes that Dulce would come out of the woods because she liked ice cream. Or tell us a little bit about that and kind of the effort that was done there by the community.
Yeah, and I mean, you could hear that music blasting around that park, and I mean, it was just, it was sort of both eerie and comforting at the same time, because you have this childlike, playful music that was in the atmosphere, but also, like, you knew the gravity of what was going on. That people were trying to do whatever they could. I mean, she was 5 years old at the time she went missing, so you're trying to think of whatever tactic could be used to bring her out. I mean, a kid that young, if they did run away, if they were hiding, they might be afraid. They might not know what's going on. So, I mean, I think in those early hours, they were just trying to do whatever they can to bring comfort, hoping that maybe she was hiding. Maybe she was, she wandered off, and that they could bring her back out of the woods safely. But as time went on, and as the hours went by, and the searches went on, and community members were looking, everywhere from the park to their own backyards to the streets, it became clear that she was not in that immediate area. And then that's when things just kind of expanded, and you saw more agencies come in and take over. I mean, I remember some of those early press conferences where it was just, we're searching here, we're looking here, we're trying this, we're trying that. And it was just, no one really knew. She literally just appeared to vanish, out of thin air. And that's the most unfortunate thing, because there wasn't a whole lot of evidence to go off of to try to find her.
Yeah. But then there was a witness who came forward, and that resulted in a sketch. And that sketch is still out there. Police, when we spoke to them, they said they'd still like to identify who that person is. Do you remember when that sketch came out? It was about a month after she went missing. What was that like? Or what did people make of that sketch?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to recall, back, I mean, because, 4 years, have passed since then. But I remember, again, it was just sort of like, all right, here's another nugget of information that people were hoping was going to lead to somebody. It was, people were hoping that that was the break in the case, that that was going to, lead them to, whoever may have taken her and, bring her back safely. And I know the family was hopeful. The family really has been hopeful throughout all of this. I know I've spoken with Dulce's mother several times, and just talking with her, anytime there was a new nugget of information or a new lead, we would go back and talk with her. She was always very, willing to talk with us, to try to get that message out there, to try to find her daughter. And it was just kind of like hope. Just there was something out there that brought hope. And every time something came out, whether it was the van, whether it was the sketch, anything like that, any new piece of information from the FBI, it kind of renewed that sense of hope. And I think that hope is still there to some degree. I know the family is hoping that she will be brought back safe and sound. But and I know we heard in that promo there, from one of the chiefs of police in that area saying that, he thinks that she is alive. And I know a lot of people are certainly hopeful that that is the case and that she will come home soon.
Yeah. Yeah, and for those of you joining us, again, I'm Claudia Vargas, investigative reporter here at NBC 10, and my colleague Matt DeLucia. We're talking about the case of Dulce Maria Alavez, who went missing in 2019. We have a documentary premiering this Friday called Somebody Knows Something, The Disappearance of Dulce. And we're happy to take any questions. I did just see a question pop up. Sorry, I kind of missed that. I don't know if we can bring it back up, but Matt, you were saying though, with the family being hopeful, there's also been kind of this cloud over the family because a lot of people in the community think that they know more than they're letting on, or that they might be suspects. And even speaking with Noema, who's Dulce's mom, she says that police tell her that they're still considered suspects. And that, from my understanding, happened pretty early on, right? That they were kind of keeping close tabs on them.
Yeah, and I know that she has been interviewed several times in relation to this. And I mean, I think that, I'm not, in law enforcement or have any, knowledge of what's going on, investigative behind the scenes. But, that generally is the case that, when somebody, goes missing, that, everyone is considered a suspect, until they can be absolutely ruled out. And because there is so little information here and there are so many question marks, it's unfortunate, but no one has been ruled out here. But you just talk with her mom, Dulce's mom, and every time I've spoken with her, and it's been a little while since I've spoken with her, it was usually in those first few months after Dulce went missing, but it just seemed like there was this look of exhaustion, this, just look of desperation, that just like that she was just tired, that, hoping that this come to an end, a happy ending soon, and that it was just weighing on her. But yeah, I mean, I know that, many different agencies, have talked with her and talked with family members to try to figure out something, because there was just, what happened here, and there really hasn't been, an answer that has developed any solid leads here. And that's, she's still missing to this day, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I mean, most law enforcement officials who we spoke with say that somebody does know something, which is kind of how we got the name of the series. And I want to bring up, because we have this at the end of the documentary, but also the end of the stories that we've been doing, previewing the documentary, and it's a QR code that we have, because if somebody does know something, if anybody has a tip, we want them to submit that. And law enforcement say you can remain anonymous. That's the QR code that will take you to the prosecutor's office, which is handling the case. And the phone number is for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Again, you can submit any tip anonymously. And police say they want to hear, no matter how small of a tip, they want everything. They'd rather just vet it out, and figure out like whether it's real or not, than not hear at all. So, there it is. And then Matt, I guess from that time, you were saying you were in Chopper. Just give us the lay of the land because it's 1,100 acres. There's several bodies of water. Just how rough did it look from up in the air in terms of the search? I don't know if you saw. I know you mentioned the search in the lake, but could you see just like people, law enforcement just trying to get into several different areas of the park, or what did that look like from up above?
Yeah, I mean, they just were combing the entire area. I mean, they had vehicles stationed at different spots around the park, and then on the perimeter, and then even beyond around that lake and the bodies of water that you mentioned. And so they, were just gearing up for a water search. They were gearing up for a land search, just to try to see if she was in that immediate area. And that search came up without a trace of her.
Yeah. And were you there when they drained one of the bodies of water? Because my understanding is they even drained a pond to see if she was there and they didn't find anything.
Now, I was not there for that part. Again, like afterwards, in those days after, as the search intensified. I mean, they did take some of those drastic measures to try to find any trace of her. But no, in those early hours, like I said, it was mostly just law enforcement fanning out, community members fanning out. It was really just a one big effort to let's find this girl. She's got to be around here somewhere. Let's find her. And then when that didn't happen, after a day or two, then it started to become all right. Let's get deeper into this effort and get more agencies involved and expand the search.
Yeah. And I know one of the controversies was also the Amber Alert because if I don't know if you recall, but for the 911 call, when Noema, Dulce's mom, first called 911, she mentions that there were a few people at the basketball court who told her that they saw Dulce run behind the sheds and that there were two men around the same time that she went back there and that they said, oh, maybe one of the men took her. So she mentions that to 911. So police have this information, yet they kept searching, hoping to find her in the woods. And it wasn't until 29 hours later that they issued an Amber Alert. So I know mom is still a little bit upset about that. At the time, that next day, was there chatter about issuing an Amber Alert, or what were people saying about that then?
Um, I don't recall too much about that. I mean, I know that, yeah, people in the community were saying like, this is, time is of the essence. So, there was definitely, an urge to take those drastic measures early on. But again, I mean, the belief early on was that she was potentially in that area. So, it wasn't until, the details of the red van, and all of the circumstances surrounding the sketches, the suspicious people around there. Once all of that started to come out, then okay, then maybe she was kidnapped. So yeah, I mean, I think there were a lot of people questioning perhaps the early moves. Was enough done early on? What could more have been done in those early hours that could have, brought a different result here? And I mean, again, like this is not something that typically happens in that area. So, I mean, this definitely came as a surprise to everyone. But, law enforcement, they're very well trained, in all types of search and rescue. So I know they definitely tried their hardest to find this little girl as quickly as possible. But I know some people out there were saying, all right, we got to amp this up a little bit. And then larger agencies did come in, and eventually, I mean, this got national attention, and this, became a national story. And so this, you had the whole country looking for this little girl, and that just, early on, people were hoping that message could have gotten out a little bit quicker.
Yeah, and we do ask law enforcement about that. In fact, we have a story that's going to air today at 5 o'clock on the Amber Alert and the question surrounding was it delayed? Why was it 29 hours that they decided to release the Amber Alert? So we'll have more details on that. And that, of course, is also part of the documentary. And again, Somebody Knows Something, The Disappearance of Dulce will be airing at 7 p.m. this Friday on NBC 10 and also our streaming channels. And I'll put up the screen where you can see which streaming channels those are. In 1 second, there we go. Yeah, so that will all be 7 p.m. on NBC 10 and the streaming channels that you see on your screen. And Matt, thank you so much for chatting with us. You were out there that second day, and your reporting actually really helped us with our storytelling. So thank you for that.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks.